For me in the mountains, where walking has a way of pulling you to your peace of mind every day.
Welcome to the Backpacking Light podcast. I'm Andrew Marshall. We thought it would be interesting to begin the year with a reflection on homecoming. For those of us who spend extended time in the wild, the transition from dirt to pavement can be a tricky one. The routines are different, the sights, smells, and sounds are different, and the mindset, how we think about ourselves and our place in the world, is different. This complex transition is the subject of Ben Kilbourne's essay, Going Home. If you're watching the video version of this podcast, you'll see a collection of photography that goes along with this essay. If you aren't, make sure and visit the show notes page and find the link to the version of this essay that we published online. This podcast is best listened to with a warm blanket and a cozy fire. Enjoy it as you daydream about your next adventure, and perhaps as importantly, as you begin to think about how that adventure will end.
Going home. Reemergence into the human world. The first reemergence happened when we reached the mouth of Phantom Creek, after a morning of cold swimming and precarious scrambling. Ahead I could see something unfamiliar, a retaining wall supporting a flat, smooth trail. It was the first human-made thing aside from distant helicopters that I'd seen in 8 days. 3 men with day packs and trekking poles appeared trucking steadily up the trail without looking in our direction. They were the first humans besides Daniel and Landon that I had seen in 8 days. Somehow, they looked more real than I felt, a ghost watching them from the shadows. Daniel and Landon would be hiking out to the south rim, and I would hike to the north rim. We said our goodbyes at this natural and built interface, and I stepped onto the trail. My speed then increased threefold in comparison to the week's slow pace. Our pace had been slow because we were hiking almost entirely off-trail, often scrambling and route finding. This was the first of several transitions from ruggedness and inconvenience to ease and convenience that would happen over the rest of the day. Having traveled off-trail for a week, the maintained trail felt almost like laying down in a bed. The second transition happened a few hours later as I neared the North Kaibab trailhead on the North Rim and disabled airplane mode on my phone. A handful of texts poured in. I was out of breath and exhausted, so I took the opportunity to sit down, eat 10 chocolate peanut butter cups, and let loved ones know that I was all right. A path of instantaneous communication appeared where before there was none, like magic. The next transition was from maintained trail to parking lot. 2 jolly tourists with legs stiff from their car ride ambled casually from the pavement to the dirt trail in an attempt to see beyond the pines. My truck was waiting for me, another nearly magic machine of comfort and convenience. I turned the key, and the engine purred as reliably as ever. I pulled out of the parking stall, stopped at a stop sign, and then turned right onto the highway north towards Utah, Kanab, I-15, Salt Lake City, and my life at home. I found a beef medallion, bean, coleslaw, salad, and chocolate lava cake dinner in Kanab, and then drove late into the night, breaking my trail routine of ramen and early bedtimes. The next day I woke late and began looking at my phone right away. Interactions grabbed me, pulled me in. I set the phone down to pick up my tea and recalled what I would have been doing if I was not at home. If I was still waking below 5,000 feet of schist, limestone, and sandstone beneath another perfectly blue sky. So let's back up about 9 days. Routine. 9 days ago, on the first morning of my Grand Canyon trip, I would have been waking at 6 a.m., sitting up at 6:30 a.m., and then making instant coffee and oatmeal as cliffs thousands of feet above me were just starting to turn morning pink. Then I would have packed up my life to walk all day, find a new place to sleep, lay down at 7 p.m., read and write until 9 p.m., fall asleep, and repeat. It's a type of routine rooted in the fundamentals of life: eat, sleep, do chores, and move around. Whereas routines at home include tasks existing in some gray area disconnected from just living. Checking email, silencing spam calls, hating the color of the couch you just bought. The purpose of some of these things feels sometimes unclear, and choices around them often feel arbitrary. Life in the wilderness, with its simplicity of routine on the other hand, reduces the amount of choice I have to contend with, and the choices that do exist seem always prescient and purposeful. Reduction of choice. Barry Schwartz, in his book The Paradox of Choice, says that, quote, autonomy and freedom of choice are critical to our well-being, and choice is critical to freedom and autonomy. Nonetheless, though modern Americans have more choice than any group of people ever has before, and thus presumably more freedom and autonomy, we don't seem to be benefiting from it psychologically, end quote. When I go to the grocery store, I am faced with too many sandwich breads, too many salad dressings, too many microbrewed beers. Choosing material goods is overwhelming enough, but there are also daily choices about what to do and when. Should I go for a hike, run, or bike ride? Should I keep working well past dark because I have several deadlines? Should I abandon all my responsibilities and just play guitar for a few hours? Backpacking reduces many of these options by simplifying goals. In a somewhat reductionist sense, the goal of backpacking is primarily to walk and look at things. I am not about to advocate for some monastic or puritanical asceticism because I derive so much joy and pleasure from objects that are impossible to carry when backpacking. I would never let go of my electric guitar and amp, for example, and I will always have an absurd amount of books and vinyl records. These things allow me to participate in human culture, and I am, after all, a human. Not participating in human culture would make me feel utterly alone. When I imagine the admittedly impossible prospect of living my life primarily in the wilderness, I feel guilt at what I would identify as isolationism, avoidance, or escapism. What I would be leaving behind would be others' thoughts and feelings about the world, how they can be reflected off my own, and vice versa. In my opinion, this expression and reflection of observations through art, music, journalism, etc., is how we learn to be in community with one another, which is valuable if we're hoping to continue to exist as a species. That said, I return from trips very aware of the fact that I have too many shirts, jackets, and shoes. There's cauliflower in the bottom drawer of the fridge I've let go to waste. I recognize that I could reduce and simplify my life so that things like this don't happen. So that I have the clothes I need that feel good to wear and nothing more. So that I buy food I know I will use and then use it. I remember that I survived just fine for a week with only one pair of pants and a few top layers. My body was nourished by oatmeal and other simple and inexpensive foods. I slept on the ground. It makes me wonder what I actually need. If I actually need less than I think I do. Distraction. On the last day of the trip, after swimming through a pretty deep part of Phantom Creek, I changed my shirt, put my rain jacket over it, and pulled my phone out of my pack. It beeped a notification at me. Your screen time is down 79% from 2 hours and 45 minutes a day to 35 minutes a day, the screen read. Wow, I thought, I cannot go back to looking at my phone that much. That's at least 2 hours that could be better spent reading, hanging out with friends, or exercising. Now here I am at home, trying to write this article, and periodically checking my phone to see if anyone texted, even though I would have heard it buzz if someone had. Again, I remember what I would have been doing last week around 11 a.m., purely focused on the task at hand, be it stepping over fields of cactus or scrambling up a red wall break. I'd take my phone, set it in my kitchen safe. Yes, I have a kitchen safe. And I set the timer for an hour. In the Grand Canyon, I didn't need to check my phone because I couldn't, and now that I can't stop. Something has to give. Exercise. In addition to my obscene amount of screen time, I also exercise less at home. 11 a.m. in front of the computer is necessary. I have to work. But work also has the tendency to consume entire days. Sometimes, by the time it's dark, I realize I've barely moved except to make breakfast and lunch. I reflect on my prior week, when I was exercising virtually every daylight hour. Often this degree of exercise has me feeling mentally and emotionally pretty great. There's got to be a better way to bake exercise into my everyday schedule so that life at home feels even just a tiny bit closer to life on the trail. Climate control. Around noon, I get up from the kitchen table where I generally work, walk to the thermostat, and crank it from 62 degrees Fahrenheit to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. In the wilderness, 62 is generally nothing to complain about. In fact, 62 would be considered exceptionally comfortable, but at home it feels downright wintry. If I not only tolerated low 60s frequently while backpacking, but actually enjoyed those temps, I wonder if I could make an effort not to crank the thermostat as often as I do. In the wilderness, I'd put on a puffy jacket. Why not put on a puffy jacket at home too and save a few dollars heating my poorly insulated house? Circadian rhythm. When the computer has been put away and the cat is looking at me like it's time for bed, I crawl into bed with a book. At 10:30 p.m., it's already far later than last week's bedtime of 9 p.m., but I still want to read. Unlike my reading headlamp, the lamp beside my bed will not dwindle irreparably from day to day, so I feel no limits on its use. Moreover, I am warm and comfortable. I read until 11:30 p.m. and then sleep until 7:30 a.m. the next morning. I've now shifted my sleep schedule ahead 2 hours or so and reduced my overall sleep time by about an hour. Studies show that maintaining a consistent sleep schedule allows the body to get into a consistent circadian rhythm. According to Sleep Foundation, a science-based source for sleep information, quote, circadian rhythm aligns our sleep and wakefulness with day and night to create a stable cycle of restorative rest that enables increased daytime activity, end quote. Light is one of the main things that affect circadian rhythm, and the absence thereof is one of the main reasons I can ease into a good sleep schedule and get great sleep while backpacking. Adapting to the unknown. Our Grand Canyon trip was challenging for me, primarily because life at home had been challenging for me. I'd been wading through unknowns day after day, and then embarked on a trip where the unknowns not only didn't let up, but actually increased. It probably wasn't the best idea at the time, and yet it also provided me with some new insights. Most backpacking trips are characterized by some degree of anticipating the unknown and adapting to it. Of course, every day in a human life is characterized by anticipating the unknown and adapting to it, just in different ways. I could have my car stolen or be broken up with on any given day. How will I respond? On our Grand Canyon trip, we knew every day we would encounter chalk stones or dry falls that would prevent us from continuing down a canyon, and that we would have to adapt. When we hit a chalk stone in Tuna Creek, we walked around, way around, and found another way into the canyon. We did so because we had to, in order to stay on a schedule and finish the trip on time. We couldn't just give up. At home, responses to the unknown are sometimes met with less certainty, less drive, less willful intention. This is due in part to the immaterial nature of unknowns and problems that arise in real life. Relationship strife, a relative's confusing medical issues, climate change, homelessness in my town, seemingly sourceless anxiety. Sometimes I respond to these things by looking the other way, working, moping around. Sometimes there's literally nothing I can do anyway. But backpacking problems have fairly clear solutions. I hoped that through solving backpacking-related problems day after day, I could address at-home problems in more direct, material ways. To be honest, it looks unlikely. But the fact that we successfully adapted to dozens of unknowns day after day for 8 days in a row in the Grand Canyon simply gave me the confidence I needed to dive back into my trickiest unknowns at home. Accomplishment begets accomplishment. In this case, backpacking accomplishments beget at-home accomplishments. It's impossible to be backpacking all the time. Despite, or maybe because of, the simple discomfort, I often feel closest to what it means to be a human animal when I'm backpacking, and I'm going to guess many listeners feel the same way. Routine, sleep schedule, and exercise are more closely aligned with the fundamental needs of the human body and the cycles of nature. But I'm also acutely aware that I can't be backpacking all the time, nor do I want to be. I'd like to feel aligned with daily cycles, and I'd like to listen closely to my body not only while backpacking. I want to live like this, or as close as I can get, all the time.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Backpacking Light Podcast. The Backpacking Light Podcast is advertising free, thanks to the membership fees paid by Backpacking Light members. A BackpackingLight.com membership gives you access to 20 years of archives, forums, and online courses. And don't forget, if you're an unlimited member, you'll get the video version of this podcast for free as a part of your membership. So please consider supporting this podcast and become a member right now at BackpackingLight.com/membership.
You can download the show notes for this episode at backpackinglight.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. It does help other people find the show.
Thanks for listening to the Backpacking Light Podcast. I'm Andrew Marshall.
And I'm Ryan Jordan. And if we can leave you with one parting message, it's this: pack less, be more, because lighter is better. Happy trails, everybody.
So I shoulder my backpack, walk away from